Hey, good afternoon. Buenas tardes. Thank you for joining me today. Sorry if there was a little confusion about the time. We're trying to find us a comfortable spot here. You can see I have a special guest co host today, Miss Mia. Do you want to look at the camera? Who turned 12 years old last Monday, and in honor of her 12th birthday, decided to do a question and answer about traveling with the pet, living abroad with the pet, all that kind of good stuff. So that's what we're going to talk about today. But before we jump into that, let me go ahead and introduce myself in case you're new here and you don't know who the hell I am. My name is Adelia Borchade. Most people around here know me as Picky Girl Travels the World. I'm a financial educator, an expat coach, and I help Black women live their dream life. If that's traveling the world, if that's moving to another country, if that's opening up a cupcake shop, whatever it is, that's what I do. I help Black women live the life they want. If that sounds like something you'd like to know more about, please subscribe to the channel, turn on notifications so you know the next time I post a new video. Good morning, everyone. I keep saying good morning. It's like 2 p.m. Eastern, not good morning. So if you have questions, go ahead and drop those in the comments and we will get to those. We'll answer those as best we can. I really wish she'd look at y'all in the camera. She got a fancy bow yesterday because she went and got her hair cut. So good morning, Dee Walker, Sharon Brown, Sheeta D of Sheeta's on the Loose. Hey, y'all. Okay. So we will go ahead and jump right into it as soon as I can find where I put my notes. Okay, so you've got a pet and you want to travel with them, or you are looking at moving abroad and you want to take your pet with you. What are the rules? It really depends. There are two sets of rules that you have to think about. There are the rules for the country. And to get probably the most up-to-date information on that, you would go to the USDA site, APHIS, APHIS. I put a link to it in the description. Come on, dude. Be nice. The USDA APHIS site. Now, the USDA is an American site, but they are probably the best one that I have found that brings together all of the different regulations and rules for countries around the world. After you look there, that kind of gives you some details whether whether it's a country that has no rules or it's a country that has a whole lot of rules like China. And then I would dig into whatever country you're going to specifically. If they have any animal import regulations, that's what I would Google to find the correct website. That information might be listed on the country's embassy website. I've rarely found it there. It's usually whatever agency in that country that is similar to the USDA that handles agriculture, animals, that sort of thing. Now, Miss Mia here has moved with me to Mexico. She's been to Mexico quite a few times to visit and to live. She has been to Honduras and she's been to China. By far, Mexico has the simplest rules, the easiest to implement and follow. China, everything about China is always so complicated. I wonder sometimes, do they go out of their way to make things complicated? Honduras was tricky because it is not a very wealthy country. A lot of information is not available online. So, as I was in the United States trying to figure out what are the rules for bringing my dog to Honduras, that was not easy information to find. And I'll be honest with y'all, I kind of had to guess and cross my fingers and hope for the best. So, like I said, there are two sets of rules that you need to know about. One for the country that you are going to. And in the description, there is a link to the USDA APHIS site. That's the starting point. The other set of rules that you have to consider are your airline. And every airline is different. There are some kind of general rules, but you will find that European airlines tend to kind of move together. American-based airlines have similar policies. Most Asian airlines are very similar, but each airline is going to be different. So you have to, you can go to their website, or you can go to bringfido.com in particular. Let me see if I can get this link for y'all. Here we go. Bringfido.com has done somewhat, and I will have to add this link to the description. They have tried to kind of bring all of the different airline policies into one place. It's a good place to start, but you really are going to have to go to your individual airline and look at what their policies are. For instance, most, if not all, Chinese airlines do not allow animals to travel in cabin. If you know anything about this dog right here, you will know that she is not flying in cargo. She is not about that life. So that created kind of a sticky situation for me as to how do I get her to the kind of small town I was living in, Hefei, China, small town of about 8 million, because most American airlines would fly you into big cities like Beijing, Shanghai, Shenzhen. Well, how do I get from there to Hefei? Usually a Chinese carrier. Chinese carriers do not allow dogs in cabin. So if I had gone that route, I would have had to rent a car to drive her myself, except I am a foreigner and I don't have a Chinese driver's license. I could pay a private driver, or I could hire a moving company. Okay. Korean Air is an Asian airline that was an exception. They allowed animals to travel in cabin. And they happened to fly to my little town of 8 million people. So we flew Korean, but it cost me twice as much as it should have because I had to fly that specific airline. Airlines are going to have rules about which breeds of animals they will allow in cabin, that they will allow at all. If you have a kind of flat-faced dog, they are not allowed to go underneath the plane because they will have breathing difficulties and they don't want something to happen to your dog. Mia is a schnauzer, and you can tell she's kind of slim. So she usually meets whatever the weight requirements are. Her breed is not a breed that the airlines have an issue with. And then they have rules about the size of the container the dog has to be in because it has to fit under the seat. Most airlines will ask you to have a soft-sided carrier so that you can kind of push it down, but they will give you specific sizes or measurements that the carrier must be within. And her carrier, she has a Sherpa. That's a brand. I bought it from Amazon, but I try not to support Amazon, so I'm not going to give y'all an Amazon link, but you can buy them at like PetSmart, places like that. I think you can probably buy them from the Sherpa website. It's soft-sided. Usually whatever kind of bag or kennel you use has to be big enough that the animal can turn around in, but it also has to meet the requirements for the seats. And we know all airlines have different size seats. So like my bag probably is too big for some airlines, but because it's soft-sided and I can squish it down, we've not had any problem with that. So you've got your country rules to deal with. You've got your airline rules. Now, sometimes those do not match up. I'll give you an example. Mexico, the country of Mexico, does not require animals to have a health certificate to enter. You will find that a lot of countries require some form of health certificate. Mexico does not. However, the airlines do. So, because Mexico, you can just bring proof of rabies, and that the animal has been treated for internal and external parasites, and they're like, fine. But we've flown United, we've flown Aeromexico, I think we flew Delta once here. They all required that she have something, a health certificate from a doctor stating that she was healthy enough to travel. And that's been coming from outside of Mexico in, as well as flying within Mexico. So it would be nice if everybody's requirements would match up, but that is not always the case. Again, if y'all have got questions, please add them in the chat, because I'm going to go through my list of things. And then I've got some questions that were posted on Instagram and sent to me earlier that we'll answer as well. So where was I? Okay. So, everybody's got different rules. Some countries are more of a pain. Some are easier. How much does it cost? That depends. It has been, Mia went to China in August of 2019. I've never sat down and added up what that cost me, because I knew that number was going to hurt my feelings. But most of the costs you need to consider if you are flying with your dog: cost of a health certificate. Depending on what kind of health certificate they require, it could be something as cheap as whatever it costs for you to go to the vet and have them write, like, hey, that my dog is healthy. Here in Mexico, a pet travel health certificate is about $15 or $18. In the United States, I've paid $150, $175 for that same document. And if, when you go to the USDA APHIS site, you find out that the country you're going to is one that requires the USDA to stamp it, that's really fun, because most states have one office that does the stamping. So, for example, I lived in Texas. The USDA office was in Austin. The international health certificate could not be more than 10 days old before your flight. So in less than 10 days before the flight, I had to take her to the vet to get the international pet health certificate done. Then I had to get it to Austin and have them stamp it and get it back to me. So I had to overnight it. I had to pay to overnight it to Austin. I had to pay like $32 for the people in Austin to stamp it. And I had to include an already paid for overnight envelope so they could send it back to me. So already right there, just on that health certificate in the US, that was more than $200 and very stressful. So depending on what you need and depending on where you are, the health certificate could get a little pricey. Proof of rabies. Every country I have been to has recognized a 3-year rabies vaccine, with the exception of China. China did not recognize her 3-year rabies vaccine. She had to have one when she came. No, she had to have 2 before she came. And then she had to get another one before we left China. I'm hoping there was not damage done to my dog, but in about a year and a half, she had about 4 rabies vaccinations. How much does it cost for you to take your animal on the plane? Because underneath the plane, if your animal is going in cargo as checked baggage, that is different. But if you're bringing them in the cabin, most international flights, it's going to be about $200 each way. United is the bargain at $125. But when flying domestically, like I think in the US, I think Southwest charges $75. Here in Mexico, Aero Mexico charges $50. When we were in Honduras, it might have been $30, $20, something like that for her to fly domestically in a country. But your international one is going to be more expensive, obviously. And with that fee, you are not getting the right to have the dog in your lap. You're not getting the right to have the dog. The dog does not get a seat. One time she flew to Atlanta with me and my youngest daughter, and her ticket cost more than the 2 of our tickets together. That is, and what you're paying for is to have the right to put the dog underneath the seat in front of you. They don't get anything else with that. I think that's one of the biggest scams. China is very complicated to get the dog in as well as to get the dog out. If y'all want to know about that drama, I can talk about it, but I'd rather not relive it if I can avoid it. So costs, you've got your health certificate, rabies vaccine, you've got the fee or the ticket to get the animal on the plane. Depending on whether they're going as checked bag or cargo, I've seen $400, $500, $600 again each way. If you are using a private pet transport, really, the sky's the limit. It could be several thousands of dollars to get your animal to the country you're trying to go to. If Mia had been a larger dog, she wouldn't be sitting with me right now in Mexico. I would have had to rehome her. But because she generally meets the weight requirement, and on average, because remember I told you, every airline has a different requirement for animals, but generally speaking, the dog or the cat and their bag should be less than 20 pounds. Mia, are you gonna stand up? You can see she's slim, but she has really long legs. So she weighs, usually she weighs about 10, 11 pounds. I have never had anybody weigh her. Really, most of the time, they just want to see, do I have my paperwork? I did, when we were leaving China, they measured her bag. And I had no idea whether her bag met their requirements. So that was nerve-wracking. But most of the time, the dog and the bag together need to be less than 20 pounds. And again, the bag needs to fit their measurement so it can go underneath the seat. Something to keep in mind if you are booking your dog in the cabin, most airlines have a limit on how many pets can be on a specific flight. So what I do is, it depends. Like when I was trying to get her to China and I knew I could only fly one airline, I identified the flight I wanted. Then I called Korean Air and asked how many pet reservations they already had on that flight, because I needed to know that there was room before I had my ticket bought and then before I could buy her ticket. But when it's, like Delta, United, we've never flown American, I don't think. Any of them, I usually book my ticket, and then within that first 24 hours, that you can typically cancel a ticket at no penalty, I will then make her reservation. Airlines differ on, do they expect you to pay for the reservation right then, or can you pay for it later? It varies. But really, the rule is for most airlines, you don't have to give them more than 24 hours notice that you want to bring a pet in cabin. But again, because there are only limited numbers of pets allowed, I like to know that she has a spot. I can't wait to the last minute for that. Okay. I see y'all's questions and we're gonna get to those. Um, okay. So something else that comes up is accommodations. I couldn't think for a second there. I have not, I didn't, I, to be honest with you, in China, I didn't even bother to ask if I could have a dog. I just showed up with one and was like, I'll play like a dumb foreigner if there's a problem. But if I'm going on vacation or I'm traveling, Airbnb, one of the filters you can use is that they allow pets. And so that will filter out the places that won't allow you to bring a pet. But I have found that if you reach out directly to the host, you may be able to make arrangements. Because she has traveled with me in the US, in Mexico, several of my Airbnb hosts, when they leave their reviews of me, also leave a review about what a great guest Mia was, blah, blah, blah. So last summer, when I first got here, and I needed a short-term Airbnb, they did not accept pets. But I messaged them and was like, you can see, the dog is in my reviews. She's in my profile picture. And they felt comfortable enough allowing her to be there. For what do you call them? Hotels, that sort of thing. I use booking.com because again, they have a filter where you can find out if a place is pet friendly, that sort of thing. Okay. Donna, a good thing. Joan says, I want to get a dog. What are your thoughts on purchasing a pet once you get to Mexico? You don't have to buy one. What is it? Adopt, don't shop. It depends on where you are in Mexico. Mexico City is incredibly pet friendly. There are some shelters here, that sort of thing, where you can get a dog. Is that a good idea? It depends on when you travel. If it's a dog that travels well and can go with you and you want to travel with them, yes. But if it's you plan to travel and the dog is going to have to stay with other people, you have to weigh that. I am very lucky I am very lucky that she is very, very easy to travel with. Most people never realize she is even on the plane. She's very quiet. She's very mellow. Really, she goes under the seat and I leave the bag open so that she can see where I am. And then she curls up and goes to sleep. I have taken her to Spanish class. I've taken her to restaurants. People, unless she shakes and her collar makes noise, people don't realize she's there. And because of her size, she's very easy to travel with. But if she was a more anxious dog or she was high strung, I don't know that I would travel with her. I don't know that I would. So I don't know. It just really depends, I think. So that's what we do for accommodations. Now, I will be completely honest with y'all. The first time I moved to Mexico City, and a happy bonus was how pet friendly it is here, I had the hardest time finding an apartment that would allow pets. And literally everyone in the city has a dog. And I was like, okay, all these people live someplace, The first apartment I found, I learned to stop asking if pets were allowed. And unless it expressly said pets were not allowed, I took that to mean they were. And my first apartment, I did not mention to him that I had a dog. He showed up one day to fix something, and there she was. And she looked at him, and he looked at her, and that was that. So it can be a little extra work. So if you're moving somewhere and you're bringing a pet with you, that's going to make you do some extra work. Now, we just had a question about, getting a dog once you move to a new country, and inevitably you may need to travel. And I think I had a question in here. Oh, yes. Can we talk about the process of finding a pet sitter abroad? If you're here, I'm going to guess you're familiar with this woman. I think her name's Stephanie Perry. She house sits, she pet sits. So yeah, trusted house sitters. You can use them to get pet sitters, just like you can go and be someone's pet sitter. I think Stephanie has mentioned numerous times that she knows people who get house sitters to watch their dogs while they go out to pet sit somebody else's. I put a link to Trusted House Sitters where you can get a 25% off discount in the description. So I used them in December. This was the first time I've ever had a pet sitter come to my place to watch my dog. I was traveling for 2 weeks because everywhere I have lived, Honduras, China, Mexico, well, not in Mexico, in Honduras and China, lots of friends always kept her. In Mexico, I got a referral for a pet sitter, and I also used a site called, what is it called? I'm about to tell y'all the wrong name. I always get this place wrong. It is called Cuida Mi Mascota. Think of it kind of like an Airbnb for dogs. On that site, you can list yourself to be a dog sitter, a cat sitter, a dog walker. You can also find dog sitters, dog walkers, those kinds of things on this site. And they are in the major Mexican markets. And so the first time that I traveled internationally and I did not take her with me when I was living in Mexico, I used that site, and it was really great. But the lady we like to use on that site, like, I would have to book her very far in advance to make sure I could get her. And so I ended up switching to I got a referral for a Russian lady who lives in town who pet sits. And until I used Trusted House Sitters this past December, anytime she's been in Mexico City, that is who Mia has gone to. So I came to visit in July 2019, and I went to Oaxaca, and the buses in Mexico is a fairly dog-friendly place, but on buses here, dogs are not allowed inside. They have to go underneath, and they want you to drug them. That was a no-no. So Mia had to sit out my trip to Oaxaca. And because I was just in town for the month, I reached back out to her dog sitter, and she was like, oh, absolutely, I remember Mia. And so Mia hung out with her while I was gone for a couple of weeks. And even when we were in China, like in the height of the beginning of the outbreak of COVID, her dog sitter from Mexico City was texting me to make sure Mia was okay. As a matter of fact, there were quite a few people messaging me to see how Mia was doing in China with the pandemic. Nobody asked about how I was doing. They were only worried about this dog. Cuida Mi Mascota, that is a great site, I think, for finding pet sitters, pet walkers in major cities in Mexico. I have also used Trusted House Sitters as well. I don't know. I have hangups about people in my space. So I don't know if I will have someone come here to keep her again. I don't know how I feel about that. I don't know. I don't know. Seeing if we have another question here. One thing, because I see several questions about larger dogs. Coming to Mexico, I've seen quite a few people who have larger dogs who do not want to send them as cargo, decide to drive. And they make the drive from the US to their Mexican destination. Um, I mean, I love Mia and all, but I don't know if I would do that. It is at least a 24-hour drive from Houston to Mexico City. Oh no, but there are people who do it, who choose to drive specifically because it makes more sense because they're bringing a large dog. Okay, we covered. Okay, vets, vet care. I had several questions about this. Finding English-speaking vets, finding vets. Most of the time, I have not gone out of my way to find an English-speaking vet. I've looked up, and the vet also did speak English because in a lot of people, you'll find with vets and doctors and dentists and people like that, a lot of them have had some kind of training in the US or some other country. And so many of them will speak English even if you don't expect it. But the website I told you about where you can find a dog sitter, they also have a thing on there where you can find a vet. I have generally used Google to find a vet. If you go on Google Maps now, if you're on your phone, you have the ability to message the vet, or a lot of times vets will list a WhatsApp number. And so often I will text to ask in Spanish or whatever the language is, to ask, can they see the dog, that sort of thing. And that has worked well for me. When I went back to the US in March, she needed a health certificate for the airline, not for the United States. All the United States cared about was, did she have her vaccines, rabies shot. But United insisted that she have a health certificate. So I needed to find a vet that could do that. And I went on Google and I messaged some places in Spanish, and I found one down the street, and not a single person in there spoke English. So it was my really bad Spanish and Google Translate, and I would show them a document I have, and we'd point, but we got it done. The only time that I found that I really needed an English-speaking vet was she got sick back in September, like really sick. I didn't know what was going on, thought she was going to die. And so we had to go to the emergency vet, and trying to place phone calls at 2:00 in the morning in my bad Spanish, that did not go well. There is a university in town. I searched through some of the foreigner Facebook groups for vet, emergency vet, English-speaking vet, discovered that there is a Banfield pet hospital here tied to the university. That's a chain that exists in the United States. Usually I think they're with, is it PetSmart? So I called their number and asked in Spanish, does somebody speak English? They found somebody who spoke English. I told them what was going on with the dog. They told me to come in. When I got there, the lady at the reception desk did not speak English, but with the doctors, they all spoke a little bit, and told me, they were like, look, whenever you come, somebody in the back will speak English, and we'll just find somebody. So depending where you go, like if you're going to some small town, some small rural town, you might have a problem finding someone who speaks English. In Mexico City, there are quite a few that speak English. Other than the emergency situation, I've not really worked hard to find someone who speaks English, because on a day-to-day basis, I can get through like vaccines and checkups and that kind of stuff with Google Translate. But when she needed to go to the emergency vet, my Spanish wouldn't work. Like all the Spanish I knew went out of my head, and it was really helpful to have somebody who spoke English. Um, we we were traveling in Guadalajara, and I was close to the time we were going to be leaving Mexico. And so I knew the airline would require a new health certificate. So I looked on Google Maps, found the nearest vet, asked if he could do it. I didn't think he spoke English until I got there and discovered he did. And so, you know, you can find them, or they may find you, but it hasn't been too big of an issue thus far. Okay, I think I have covered the major topics that I wanted to cover. So let's go to your questions. Okay. Okay. So, one of the questions we had, somebody is coming to Mexico to kind of do like a scouting reconnaissance trip, and they're wondering, should they bring the dogs with them when they're visiting different places in Mexico, to figure out like where they want to live? Should they bring their dogs with them? It'll be easier on this trip, if you did not bring them, but it's not impossible. It's just, you're going to have to make sure that you find all of your accommodations. You'll have to make sure are willing to accept animals. I don't know. I've never been someplace that had a limit on the number of animals per person. Because I know some airlines will limit, it's one pet per person when you fly. So people, like you're a single person and you have 3 pets, if you're wanting to bring them in the cabin by yourself, that's tricky because most airlines have a limit on that. But I can't say that I've ever come across any hotels or anything like that have had that issue. I think it'll be easier to do your initial fact-finding trip without the dogs, but if you really feel like you want to bring them, you can. What are you doing? Sorry. So choicey. Okay. Another question we had was, do you purchase your familiar dog food brands locally or adapt to new brands? Well, we have had to adapt because the first place we went was Honduras. And I don't know if I mentioned this to y'all, but in Honduras, there are no mailing addresses and there is no mail service. So any thoughts I had of, I can just order some stuff online and get it sent to me, that became incredibly difficult and not an option. So she had to adjust to what was there. We started with, Hill Science Diet. It was something they had at the vet that was for schnauzers. It was fine. When we came to Mexico, she ate Purina, which is not necessarily what she ate in the US. It wasn't a big deal. Where it was a big deal was when we went to China, because I don't know if y'all remember a few years ago when there was that scandal where the people's animals were dying from the Chinese dog food because there were ingredients being used that shouldn't be used. So I was very concerned about not feeding her Chinese dog food when we were in China. I could not get the American brand I wanted. So I kind of did some research to find a Canadian brand that I felt comfortable with the ingredients. And so I bought imported Canadian dog food on Taobao in China and paid through the nose for it. Again, I don't like to think about how much I spent, but it was a lot. And then when we came back to Mexico, I tried to feed her something I thought was good from PetSmart or Petco. I can't remember which one we have here. And I think that was the culprit of why she ended up needing to go to the emergency room. So we went back to the imported Canadian dog food that is a little cheaper, but it was still expensive. And then I discovered there are HEB. I'm from Texas. If you're from Texas, you know HEB, the grocery store. There are HEBs located in the northern part of Mexico, but they will ship. So I found her favorite dog food at HEB. It's a HEB brand. And I ordered a couple of bags online and they shipped it to me here in Mexico City. So usually we're adapting. I will say in Mexico City, if you want like gourmet dog food, you want like fresh dog food, like you've got those options here. If there is something from Petco, we have Petcos here. We have Walmarts, but I find that they tend to carry the Mexican versions more than foreign ones. Can I buy a second seat on the plane if you have two pets? Yes, but okay. Let's say you're an individual traveling by yourself. You've got two dogs, or two pets, you want to bring them in the cabin. To get that extra space, I think you can buy another seat, but you would still have to pay the pet fee on top of that. Does that make sense? So whatever two plane tickets cost you, then two pet fees. I believe that is allowed. I believe. May not be, but I think it is. Yes, are there aware of any raw dog food companies there in Mexico City? Yes. Not in like the neighborhood I live in, because I live in a very local neighborhood, but in Polanco and Condesa and Roma, you can get raw dog food. What's the really famous brand in the US? Blue something. They have stuff very similar to that. If not those brands, you can get that here. That's doable. If you were in a smaller town, maybe not. But in Mexico City, you can virtually get anything here. Okay. Got a question about English-speaking vets, pet sitters. Somebody asked, how do you get vet care while you are traveling abroad with pets? Really, Google Maps has been my go-to. If I am in an area and I need a vet, I just search for vets and go from there and cross my fingers and hope they speak some English. I would also say, if you don't want to go that route, connect with the foreigners, the expats that live there. Because even in China, I was able to do that, to find out who is the English speaking vet, or who do y'all take your pets to. That's not been too big of a deal. Okay, would love to know what kind of documents are required to travel internationally, medical, other. This varies. A lot of European countries use what is called a pet passport. Mia does not have, come here. Mia does not have a pet passport. She's not needed it, although she did get the Chinese version of that to leave China. The US, very easygoing. Proof of rabies. Today is July 11th. I don't know if this is going to impact anybody, but if you are traveling with a dog to the United States after July 14th, they have banned dogs coming from like 100 different countries they feel that the rabies situation is not stable. So, for instance, a friend of mine took her dog to Honduras last month. They had to bring him back early, July 8th, because even though the dog is from the United States, the owners are from the United States, the dog was in Honduras with them on vacation and going back to the United States. Under this new rule that goes in effect on, I believe, July 14th, their dog would not have been allowed entry because their dog spent time in a country that is on this no-no list for Rabies. Luckily, Mexico is not on that list. So as long as Mia is going to the US from Mexico, it's not going to be an issue. But I don't know who's watching this that might be thinking of going elsewhere and then passing through the US to go somewhere else. This has caused quite a headache, as you can imagine, for a lot of dog owners. So depending, some countries require a pet health certificate. So when we went to Honduras, they needed the pet health certificate. They needed it to be stamped by the people at the USDA. And then when she got there, I had to go into this special little office with basically their food and animal investigators or whatever. And she had to be inspected. And then I think I had to pay the equivalent of $21 for that. To go to China, just to give y'all some idea, she had to have multiple rabies, because China is like serious about not getting rabies. She had to have multiple rabies vaccinations within a certain time frame. I had to get her a blood titer test for rabies to prove that she had the antibodies. They only accepted test results from 8 labs in the world. So I had to pay for the vet for her to get her blood drawn. I had to FedEx the blood to the lab. And then I had to pay the lab for the test results. What else did she have to have? She had to have a regular health certificate. And I think there's a couple of other things she had to have. So the medical requirements, the minimum is going to be rabies, but it could get very extensive. And this, if you're going to a country that's an island, you need to factor in quarantine, because that's one of the reasons Mia did not go to China with me when I initially moved, because at that time, China required animals to spend, I think, 30 days in quarantine. And again, my dog, she's too much of a person to spend 30 days in quarantine with strange animals she doesn't know. So like Australia, Hawaii, New Zealand, the UK, pretty much Singapore, any place that's an island, you're going to have to factor in that. And there may be additional costs as well. Are there car rental companies that allow dogs? That's a good question, because I have rented cars when I was in the US, and I can't tell you for sure their policies allowed me to have a dog. Now, she sat in her bag when she was in the car, but I don't know. Because again, I get spoiled being here in Mexico, where like the other day, I saw a guy get into a taxi with like 2 pit bulls that were not in bags. They were just on a leash. And like, people have animals. Everybody doesn't have a car here. So they are taken in taxis, in Ubers, on public transit, whether that's the rule or not. So being in the US and renting a car and then being like, yeah, you have to sign that you're not going to put a dog in here. Okay, sure, I'll sign, but she's going to be in there in the bag. So I have, I have her dog bag. They see the bag when I'm signing for the car. So I guess it's don't ask, don't tell. I don't know. What other question do we have? Are there airlines that are more pet friendly than others? I think this is particularly an issue or a concern when you are putting an animal in cargo. Like I've heard lots of great things about Lufthansa. I will tell you that Korean Air actually has a frequent flyer program for pets. So I felt like Korean Air was really, really good. I don't have any complaints about United or Delta. I mean, they didn't give me any problems, but they didn't necessarily go out of their way. I will tell you, if you're going through the airport, I make a habit of when she travels to make sure to get her hair cut before, because cute dogs get better treatment. Like If you're wondering, like maybe your dog's a little heavy and you're like, oh, I don't want them to weigh the dog, make sure that dog looks cute, because they get all caught up in, oh, the dog is cute, can I pet? Nobody even thinks to measure the bag or weigh the dog. So I would definitely say cute dogs get treated better. Are you allowed to place small pets on your lap after takeoff? The rule says you are not supposed to. They are supposed to remain in the bag, and the bag is supposed to be closed and under the seat the entire time. But I will tell you that on long haul international flights, I've taken her out, put her on my lap under the blanket because she is well behaved. I've never had any other customer complain, and I've never had a flight attendant complain. But the rule is technically that they are not supposed to come out of the bag. Any max flight duration to consider when traveling with pets? Yes. And I'm trying to remember what the rule is, because some airlines, I believe it was Delta at one point, was saying that they would not allow pets on flights that were more than 12 hours. And I know we were on a flight that was more than 12 hours because we were going from the US to Korea. If your animal is in cargo going underneath the plane, I know there are requirements. There are limits about how long the animal can be in transit. With Mia, my dog, she can like before the flight, I don't give her anything to eat, only give her very, very little water and I give her a little water during the flight. Like if it's a long, international flight, I'll give her a little water during the flight, not a whole lot, but I don't want her to get dehydrated. But when we got to Korea, I was like, okay, great. We have like a 5-hour layover. I can take her to the pet relief area. And then I discovered they didn't have a pet relief area. That has turned out to be a very American thing. I believe there might be a couple of European airports that have areas where you can take your dog. I didn't know this. Because we'd always either flown in the US, or even when we didn't have a direct flight to Honduras, still total, we were talking about 3-4 hours. So it was never an issue. And what I should have done was I should have brought pee pads with me so that she could go on those. I'm not sure if she would have used them or not, because she's an old dog and that's a new trick. But that would be my strongest suggestion to you. The thing that I've learned is, even if your dog doesn't normally use pee pads, carry them just in case, because I was crossing my fingers as we sat in that Korean airport, hoping that by the time we landed in China, she would get a chance to go to the bathroom. And then when we got to China, I wasn't completely sure they were going to let her in, because I had like checked every box. I'd crossed all the T's, I dotted the I's, but it's still China and they are very arbitrary about things. And so I was fully prepared, like I may have to just get on another flight and go back. They may not let me bring my dog in. But I think the airport that I flew into was not prepared to receive dogs, because remember I told you back when they used to require quarantine, all of the dogs had to go specifically to like Shanghai and Beijing. And so that's where the quarantine facilities, that's where the dog check-in stuff was. Well, at the Hefei airport, there was no place for me to go. So we just kind of walked out the airport. When you scan your bags to leave, I didn't scan the bag with the dog in it. And I was like, if they say something to me, I'll show them the paperwork. They didn't say anything. So she didn't get a chance to go to the bathroom until we like got to my apartment. And that was rough. I felt really bad for that. So that was my poor planning that screwed over the dog. Okay, somebody's asking about life in Mexico City. If you want to run into a shop and you're out walking with your dog, what's the deal with that? If depending on the store. If they don't allow dogs in the store, a lot of places have a place for you to tie your dog up outside. So like you go to the grocery store or you go to the OXXO, which is like a convenience store, there's a pet parking space. And it's not unusual to be outside the grocery store and see 4 dogs tied up waiting for their owner to come back outside. So nobody is going to like give you a hard time if you've got to tie your dog up while you run into a store. I do it in the morning when I go to the bakery, if they don't allow dogs in. And a lot of the restaurants here will have like a dog bowl with water out front, that sort of thing. So it's very accommodating. People understand that you are out and about with your dog and you need to do other things. So to see a dog parked right outside the door, that's not a big deal. I think those all the questions from Instagram and from earlier. I don't know. Do y'all have any other questions? And yes, there is pretty privilege for pets. I can't tell y'all how many times we have gone to the airport and the people, and I do use it to my advantage. I'm not even going to lie. The people at the ticket counter, they're like, oh, can we see? And then they see her and it's, oh, well, can we hold her? Sure, hold her. Then we don't have to measure the bag or weigh the bag. So yeah, I definitely use my dog's pretty privilege. I think, have I covered everything? We covered food, we covered accommodations, vets, pet sitters, dog walkers. I will say, if you have a small dog, like most airlines require an animal be at least 8 weeks because they want them to be old enough to have had a rabies vaccine. That's something to keep in mind. People with cats often want to put 2 animals together in a bag. A lot of airlines don't want you to do that. It does depend on weight. And cats, you can get away with that. You cannot get away with that with dogs, I don't think. All right. So I think that covers what we want to know about pets. Someone told me that you cannot get papers for emotional support. Okay. As far as I know, in Mexico, emotional support animals are still a thing. I know in the United States, they've changed the rules and ESAs are no longer recognized by the airlines. It has to be an official service dog. As far as I know, if you are in Mexico, like you're in Mexico City and you're trying to fly to Guadalajara, you can still have an ESA and whatever privileges that an airline grants with that. Mia's never flown as an ESA. I've always, much to my chagrin, paid whatever the fee is to have her fly in the cabin with me. But now, whether that's still recognized in Europe, I think it depends on the country. I can tell you that China did not recognize ESAs, but I'm sure that's not a surprise to anybody watching this, because I did consider that as an option, but the airline, Delta, Korean Air, were basically like, yeah, but once you fly to China, all bets are off. It doesn't matter. It doesn't count anymore. So, a couple of things just to remind y'all of. If you have a dog and you're thinking about needing a pet sitter, now think about this. Stephanie always talks about trusted house sitters. Just like you can get house sitting gigs all around the world, you can get pet sitters all around the world. So like I listed my apartment in Mexico City and I had people from Mexico who wanted to come pet sit. I had people in the United States. So that is an option. And remember, there's a link in the description to give you 25% off of your membership with with Trusted House Sitters. There is also a link in the description for Cuidar a mi mascota, which gets you access to pet sitters, pet walkers, that kind of thing. Major markets in Mexico. I think you save 180 pesos on your first reservation. I can't remember what it is. I've also linked to the USDA APHIS website, and to bringfido.com. They are good if you want to look at what are some of the airline requirements. You want to search for hotels, restaurants, and what their pet policy is, and all of that kind of stuff. I don't see any more questions. I'll pause for a second. See if you've got a question, ask it, y'all. And if there are no more questions, I will thank you for watching and ask you to subscribe if you have not. And I will see y'all very soon.